Welcome back to another edition of Issues and Interviews with Kieran Michael Lalor on the Hudson Power Broker channel. No guest today. First time we've ever done this in the video podcast era of Issues and Interviews. But we're going to get it done. We've got a great issue. I mean, a really important issue, a very timely issue. Matter of fact, earlier today in the New York State Assembly Government Affairs Committee, I voted on this particular piece of legislation. There is a push, and it sounds very innocuous. There is a push to repeal Section 50A of the New York State Civil Rights Law, which usually you don't want to go around repealing things that say civil rights, but the left, the Democrat majority, even people who have emailed me, are calling for the repeal of Section 50A of the New York State Civil Rights Law. And right now, what the law says is, if you're a police officer, if you're a corrections officer, even a firefighter or an EMT, if somebody wants to get a hold of your records, they have to go through a court process. They need the court to okay it and make sure it's not a fishing expedition. There's a reason that you want these records, litigation or some other valid reason why you want to find out this information about one of our first responders. It makes sense. It's been in place since 1976. Well, the bill that passed the Government Operations Committee and is going to come to the full floor of the New York State Assembly either today or tomorrow changes all that. Now you can get a first responders personnel file just with a simple Freedom of Information Law request. You ask for it, you get it. You don't have to have a situation where you're in litigation. There's no judge to make sure that the parameters are, you only see what is necessary to see for the reason that you're requesting the file. And it's basically regulated. You know, the left likes regulation, except for when regulation doesn't suit them. The current system is working. There is a process right now. And we're about to change that, and we're going to change it for the worse. Here's the first big problem. Here's the first big problem with the repeal. And it's not even specific to the details of the repeal of 50A, but we're going to ram through the repeal of a 40-year-old law that is working. If you want to find out if police officers are doing wrong, there's a process to do that and find that out. So the process is working. We're going to change all that. It's going to have a lot of intended and unintended consequences. And we're doing it at the last minute. We're doing it basically in reaction to protests. And we have had no hearings. We've heard from no experts. We haven't kicked the tires on this. And if it's such a great bill, why wouldn't it stand up to the scrutiny of a couple days or a couple of hearings to really evaluate this thing and think it through and talk to the stakeholders, talk to district attorneys, talk to law enforcement people, talk to defense attorneys, talk to the people in the system, talk to judges, because we did this last year. We ran through criminal justice reform in so-called bail reform. And then in the last week, we have district attorneys begging Cuomo to basically give them a loophole around bail reform because we had looters and rioters getting arrested, and they're in the station house for an hour, and they're right back out on the street because they can't be held on bail. And you have the same people who were cheering for bail reform asking for relief and a do-over from bail reform. So why are we going to make the same mistake twice, and with the potential for the same deadly consequences? The other thing, this bill was originally supposed to include personal information from a police officer, firefighter, EMT, corrections officer. So you would be able to get the file and you'd know this person's home address. You might know his spouse's name, all this stuff. That's been redacted, which I think is good. And it's to the credit of the drafters of this bill. I think they've shown a little good faith, or they did what they had to do to get enough votes. So you can't get the personal information. It's supposed to be redacted. But my question is, what happens if it's not redacted? What if the clerk who's supposed to do the redacting makes a mistake, and now we just gave, with no judicial review, with no parameters set by a court, we just give a person who hates police officers the home address of a police officer? And we know bad groups, MS-13 and other groups have asked for their members to go into the neighborhoods of police officers and kill them. We know that there have been targeted assassinations of police officers over the years, and even in the past week, there's been shootings, stabbings, a hit and run of a police officer, all done intentionally. So there are crazy people out there who want to do harm to cops, especially in this environment. And why are we going to give them potentially, because some clerk might make a mistake, we're going to potentially give them the information to commit some kind of atrocity? And I also know that the left works incrementally. So they didn't get exactly what they wanted. In this case, they didn't get the personnel information. They've agreed to leave that redacted. But in a year, we might hear, and this often happens, we might hear, you know what, that last repeal didn't go far enough. We need to get the personal information. We need 100% transparency. We need to know where these cops live. That's our right to know, because they're city employees or state employees or municipal employees. So I always worry about the incrementalism of the left, because that's a game that they play better than anyone else. So here's a likely scenario. You have a police officer, he's a good cop, has never done anything wrong, no complaint has ever been substantiated against him, but he arrests people. He makes enemies by doing his job and taking bad guys and getting them off the street, testifying at their trial, putting them in jail. He has enemies. So we have people who have a motive, whether it's the criminal himself or his family or his friends, who have a motive to go after a police officer. Now that person with a motive to go after a police officer, all they have to do if this bill becomes law, which is very likely, unfortunately, simple FOIA request, they get all the information, and in a 10, 20, 15-year career of a police officer, there's going to be a lot of unsubstantiated allegations against that officer. It's the easiest thing in the world to make an allegation. This guy abused me. Well, it was looked into, and it was never substantiated. That's in there. So that information is going to be used, can be taken out of context, going to be used to incite, it's going to be used to justify violence. Why are we going to allow that? Substantiated claims? If this bill just said, hey, if there are substantiated complaints of police brutality in somebody's personnel file, if there are substantiated claims of that person abusing his position or her position, that would be fine. But we're going to allow unsubstantiated claims. And you know what happens a lot? Let's say somebody makes a frivolous accusation, brings a frivolous civil lawsuit against a police officer. Well, the town attorney or the city corporation counsel represents the police department. The lawyer goes to court. The lawyer will do the settling. Maybe they'll settle because of whatever reason they decide that's the best way to go about it legally. Well, just because the matter's settled doesn't mean that the law enforcement officer did anything wrong, admitted to doing anything wrong. A lawyer, without consulting with the police officer who is where this complaint originated, makes that decision as a legal decision and as a financial decision for the municipality that he or she represents. But that kind of stuff is going to be in there. And somebody's going to say, look, this police officer was accused of this bad thing, and it was so bad that the city had to settle. When in reality, it was a frivolous claim, but the lawsuits and the work was piling up, and then for judicial economy and to move things along, for whatever reason, a settlement was deemed to be the path of least resistance, and the city settled with the plaintiff for maybe some nominal amount. These are the kinds of things that are going to happen. These are the kind of unintended consequences. And you know what I hear a lot? I hear this from retired police officers. I hear this from police officers at the end of their career, and they're 100% right. Good people, good men and women are not going to go into law enforcement. They're not going to become corrections officers if we make it impossible to do their job, if we put them under this microscope, if we give those who mean to do them harm tools to do them harm, whether physical harm or reputational harm. Why are you going to get good people? Why are good people going to become police officers? It's already a dangerous job. You don't become a millionaire. And now you have to risk being sued, being fired just for doing your job. Now, that doesn't mean that those who are brutal, police officers who are brutal and abuse their authority shouldn't be punished. But often a good police officer has to use physical force or has to use his firearm or her firearm. And they're subject to all layers of scrutiny, state criminal complaints, civil suits, a federal civil rights suit. So they put a lot on the line, and we're giving disincentives for good people to become law enforcement officers, and we all lose when that happens. And the last unintended consequence is an increase in what for the last 4 or 5 years has been called the Ferguson effect. We know the riots in Ferguson, Missouri from a few years ago during the Obama administration. Michael Brown was shot by a police officer. It turns out he was attacking the police officer and trying to take his gun. Myths surrounded that. Even the Obama Justice Department agreed that hands up, don't shoot didn't happen. But they basically burned down that city. There was rioting. And police officers around the country took notice, and they said, you know what? I've been very proactive in my career, but now I'm not getting out of the patrol car unless I really have to. Because why am I going to put my life on the line, my reputation on the line, my career on the line if I don't absolutely have to? And you know what happens when police officers are concerned about being proactive police officers? crime occurs. And crime occurs in already crime-ridden neighborhoods, and the problem gets worse. And the proponents of this legislation, this 58 repeal, they claim that they want to make things better for poor people, for minority people, but things that make police officers less proactive, which this bill certainly will do, which a lot of what's been going on in the last week, attacks, both physical and rhetorical attacks on police officers, will certainly, whether consciously or subconsciously, make police officers less proactive for self-preservation reasons and common sense reasons. You know who that hurts the most? That hurts minority communities. That hurts poor communities. That hurts communities that already have a crime problem. So we're not thinking this through. It has unintended consequences that have to be talked about. And I don't think because there are marches in the streets, a week later, we have to enact legislation without the proper vetting. Like I said at the beginning, if this is a good piece of legislation, it can stand up to the scrutiny of hearings. But I know there's a lot of unintended consequences. This is going to do much more harm than good to our communities, and in particular, our inner city communities, minority communities, poorer communities. This is going to make their lives more difficult, despite what the proponents of this bill say. So I voted against it in the committee. I plan to vote against it on the floor if it comes up today or tomorrow. And I hope, if you can call your state senator and your member of the assembly, unless it's me, because I'm already voting no. I hope you'll do that and let them know that this is a really bad bill. And if it was a good bill, they wouldn't be afraid to let it have some scrutiny. All right, that's it. I hope you'll subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's free. You just subscribe. It takes about 2.5 seconds. But the more subscribers we have, the more information we can get out there, and spread the good word and reach more people with our very good message for New York State and the country. Thanks for watching. I can't wait to talk to you again.